Hey guys, tonight we're delving into a topic that proves even the most powerful people on Earth couldn't escape the chilling grip of ancient superstition. What happened when Roman emperors were cursed? And more, imagine, if you will. The bustling forum in Rome, marble gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, legions marching, senators debating. At the heart of it all stands the emperor, a figure of immense power, almost a living god. Yet, beneath the imperial purple and the laurel wreath, a profound fear lurked, the fear of unseen forces, of whispered malevolence, of a curse designed to bring down even the mightiest ruler. And honestly, if you were actually there, you'd probably be too busy trying not to get trampled by a chariot to worry about curses. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from tonight? And what time is it now? Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the heart of an empire that prided itself on reason, law, and military might. Yet, even in this highly organized and sophisticated society, belief in magic, omens, and curses was deeply ingrained, permeating every level, from the lowliest slave to the most powerful Roman emperor. For these supreme rulers, the threat of a curse was particularly terrifying, as it represented an attack not just on their personal well-being, but on the very stability and divine favor of the empire itself. Think about the immense power wielded by a Roman emperor. They controlled vast armies, immense wealth, and the lives of millions. They were often deified after death, and sometimes even worshipped as living gods. Yet, this very elevation made them targets. The more power you had, the more enemies you made, and for those who couldn't strike with a sword or political maneuvering, there was another weapon: magic, specifically the curse. One common historical truth is that magic, including cursing, was a recognized, albeit illicit, part of Roman society. While official state religion emphasized public rituals, sacrifices, and the appeasement of the gods, private magical practices, especially those intended to harm, existed in the shadows. These practices were often viewed with suspicion by the authorities, sometimes even outlawed, but their persistence indicates a deep-seated belief in their efficacy. If you had a personal grudge against someone, particularly someone powerful and seemingly untouchable, a curse might be your last, desperate resort. A fascinating and chilling detail is the discovery of numerous curse tablets depictions aimed at public figures, including, implicitly, those close to power. These were small sheets of lead, often inscribed with curses in tiny, almost illegible script, then rolled up, pierced with nails, and buried in places associated with the underworld, or the target like graves or wells. Imagine discovering one of these, perhaps tucked away in a wall near the imperial palace, calling for the downfall of a specific senator, or perhaps even the emperor himself, wishing him illness, electoral defeat, or a painful death. Historians still debate how widespread these curses were against emperors specifically, as overt examples are rare and risky to produce. However, the general practice of cursing powerful individuals was certainly present, suggesting that even imperial figures weren't immune from such dark wishes. Here's a Roman curse joke to lighten the mood. Why did the Roman emperor break up with his astrologer? Because he said their stars just weren't aligning, get it? Stars like destiny. Okay, I'll stick to history. The very nature of imperial rule fostered an environment where paranoia thrived. Emperors lived under constant threat of assassination, conspiracy, and political betrayal in such a high-stakes world. Any unexplained illness, any sudden misfortune, any political setback could easily be attributed to a curse. Was it indigestion, or was it a dark ritual performed by a jealous rival? The line often blurred, feeding into the emperor's already heightened sense of vulnerability, Consider the sensory environment of the imperial court. The whispers, the political intrigue, the sycophantic courtiers, all creating an atmosphere of tension. A sudden illness sweeping through the palace. A series of bad omens reported by the augur's priests who interpreted signs from the gods. Or even a strange encounter in the labyrinthine corridors could trigger fears of a magical assault. The emperor, surrounded by opulence, might still feel a chill down his spine, a constant awareness of invisible enemies. Furthermore, the belief in the power of the evil eye in video was widespread. This was a malevolent gaze, often unintentional, that could bring misfortune or harm upon an envied individual. Emperors, by virtue of their immense wealth and power, would have been particularly susceptible to invidia. Charms and amulets were commonly worn to ward off this unseen threat, even by the most powerful individuals, highlighting their constant, underlying fear of unseen forces, one particularly chilling and less commonly known. Aspect of this fear was the imperial crackdown on private magical practices. Emperors like Augustus, Tiberius, and Diocletian issued edicts and laws against malicious magic or forbidden arts, magia sacrilegia. These laws weren't just about controlling dissent. They reflected a genuine fear among the ruling elite that such practices could be used against them. Anyone caught practicing forbidden magic, especially against a public figure, faced severe punishment, including exile, confiscation of property, or even execution. This state-sanctioned repression underscores the very real threat perceived from curses. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, dreamless quiet, remember that even the all-powerful Roman emperors, who commanded legions and ruled vast territories, were not immune to the primal human fear of curses. Their lives were filled with grand ambition and brutal power struggles, but also with an underlying paranoia about unseen magical forces that could bring their divine rule crashing down. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the quiet certainty that your only worries tonight are whether you remembered to set your alarm. You've witnessed the pervasive fear of curses that permeated even the highest echelons of Roman society, affecting the very emperors themselves. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues its soothing lull, we'll zero in on one of the most direct and chilling forms of magical assault in the Roman world, the Defixiones, or curse tablets. Tiny lead scrolls meticulously crafted to inflict harm upon enemies. Imagine yourself walking through the bustling streets of ancient Rome. You might pass by a temple, a bathhouse, or a bustling marketplace. What you wouldn't see, hidden beneath the earth, tucked into walls, or tossed into wells, are these silent, malevolent instruments, carrying the dark wishes of the wronged, the jealous, or the desperate. One common historical truth that makes Defixiones so fascinating is their physical nature and widespread discovery across the Roman Empire. Thousands of these tablets have been unearthed, from Britain to Egypt, providing direct, tangible evidence of widespread magical practice. They were typically thin sheets of lead, a metal considered suitable for the underworld due to its dullness and pliability, making it easy to engrave. You can almost feel the cold, heavy metal in your hand, inscribed with tiny, vengeful words. A fascinating and often disturbing detail is the highly specific and personal nature of these curses. Unlike generic, vague curses, Defixiones often name their target, sometimes even including their mother's name to ensure precise identification. The curses themselves were incredibly detailed, wishing for specific misfortunes: a charioteer to lose a race, a lover to be rejected, an opponent in court to stammer and forget his words, or a thief to suffer a painful illness. Imagine the intense focus, the seething resentment, poured into these tiny inscriptions. Historians still debate the precise rituals involved in creating and activating Defixiones, while many were simply inscribed and buried. Some evidence suggests the use of effigies, nails piercing the tablet symbolically binding the victim, or specific incantations. Here's a Roman curse tablet joke for you. Why did the Roman curse tablet get bad reviews? Because it was always too lead-heavy and lacked a good point. The language used on depictions was often formulaic, invoking chthonic deities, gods of the underworld like Hecate, Persephone, or Mercury in his role as a psychopomp, guiding souls to the underworld. The cursors would appeal to these deities, essentially deputizing them to carry out their vengeful wishes. The tablets would ask for the victim's limbs to wither, their tongue to be tied, their mind to be confused, or their business to fail spectacularly. The sheer variety of misfortunes wished upon rivals speaks volumes about the cutthroat nature of Roman society. From the chariot race track to the courtroom, consider the act of burying these tablets. They were often placed in locations believed to be liminal or associated with the dead and the underworld graves. Tombs, wells, springs, or even foundations of houses. This was not just about hiding them. It was about ensuring that the curse would be delivered to the appropriate supernatural powers and that it would be effectively activated. Imagine a Roman silently, furtively, burying a tiny rolled-up lead tablet under the cover of night, convinced that their dark wish would soon come to fruition. Furthermore, the scribes or magicians who created these tablets were often specialized practitioners. While some individuals might have tried to make their own, many would pay a professional to ensure the curse was correctly formulated and inscribed with the proper magical symbols and invocations. This suggests a commercial aspect to the practice of cursing. Where a market existed for those seeking supernatural retribution, you were essentially hiring a spiritual hitman, one particularly chilling and less commonly known aspect is the use of depicciones in gladiatorial contexts. Gladiators, and especially charioteers, were often targets of these curses, wished ill health, broken limbs, or defeat in their contests. Fans of rival teams, or even fellow competitors, would commission these tablets, hoping to gain an unfair advantage through supernatural means. Imagine the pressure on a gladiator, knowing that not only were their opponents trying to kill them, but unseen forces might also be conspiring against them through these dark rituals. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, silent quiet, remember that depictions were a tangible manifestation of Roman paranoia, rivalries, and a deep-seated belief in the power of sympathetic magic. These tiny lead tablets, unearthed centuries later, offer a chilling glimpse into the dark underbelly of Roman society, where even the most mundane grievances could be escalated into a supernatural war. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest threat tonight is simply an uncharged phone. You've delved into the chilling world of depicciones, those tiny lead tablets silently carrying the dark wishes of ordinary Romans. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we ascend to the dizzying heights of power, where the stakes were infinitely higher. We're about to explore the secretive world where Roman emperors, despite their immense authority, both genuinely feared and strategically employed dark magic for political gain. Imagine the Roman imperial court a labyrinth of marble halls, whispered conspiracies, and ruthless ambition. In this environment, where loyalty was fleeting and betrayal lurked around every corner, emperors were constantly seeking an edge, a way to secure their position, eliminate rivals, or subtly influence events. And for some, magic, including the use of curses or counter-curses, became an undeniable tool in their imperial arsenal. One common historical truth that highlights this imperial engagement with magic is the presence of astrologers and magicians within the imperial household. While publicly condemned and often persecuted, certain emperors privately consulted these practitioners for their perceived ability to divine the future, influence events, or even cast protective spells. Figures like Tiberius, notorious for his paranoia, was known to consult astrologers regularly. Despite outwardly appearing disdainful of such practices, This dual standard reflected the deep-seated belief in magic's power, even by those who publicly dismissed it. You can almost imagine an emperor, behind closed doors, nervously asking about the fate of a rival, or the best day to launch a campaign. Based on astrological charts, a fascinating and deeply unsettling. Detail is the use of magical practices by emperors or their inner circle to target political rivals or solidify their own power. Historical accounts, though often biased, hint at emperors employing sorcerers to cast malevolent spells on their enemies, or to create love potions, though often more akin to coercive magic to control individuals. The infamous Emperor Nero, for example, was rumored to have dabbled in various magical rites, seeking both personal power and the downfall of those who opposed him. This wasn't about petty grievances, it was about the ultimate Game of Thrones. With supernatural weapons in play, historians still debate the extent to which these accusations of imperial magic were genuine practices versus political smear campaigns designed to discredit unpopular emperors or their enemies. However, the fact that such accusations were believed by the public speaks to the pervasive fear of imperial magic. Here's a Roman court joke for you. Why did the emperor hire a magician as his chief advisor? Because he wanted to make his political opponents disappear. The emperor's fear of curses was often intertwined with their own paranoia about assassination. A sudden, unexplained illness, a series of bad omens, or even a failed military campaign could easily be interpreted as the result of a magical attack. This constant vigilance against unseen magical threats added another layer of stress to an already high-pressure existence. The emperor might surround himself with bodyguards, but how do you guard against an invisible curse? Consider the symbolic power of the emperor's person as the divine representative on Earth. Their well-being was intrinsically linked to the well-being of the empire. Therefore, any perceived magical attack on the emperor was an attack on Rome itself. This magnified the threat of curses, turning them into acts of treason punishable by the most severe penalties. The public, too, would have been deeply concerned, believing that a cursed emperor could bring ill fortune upon the entire populace. Furthermore, emperors sometimes used the accusation of magic or sorcery as a convenient pretext to eliminate political opponents. If a rival became too popular or too powerful, they could be accused of practicing forbidden arts or attempting to curse the emperor. This provided a legal, albeit flimsy, justification for their execution or exile, removing them from the political landscape without having to resort to overt rebellion. You could be accused of trying to curse the emperor for simply owning a strange amulet, and your fate would be sealed. One particularly chilling and less commonly known aspect of imperial magic was the attempt to divine the length of an emperor's reign or the succession using illicit methods. While official augury and haruspicy reading entrails were sanctioned, private attempts to use magic to predict or influence imperial succession were strictly forbidden due to their treasonous implications. Discovering someone attempting to magically predict or manipulate who would be the next emperor would lead to immediate and brutal punishment, as it was seen as a direct threat to the established order. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, dreamless quiet, remember that the Roman imperial court, despite its outward grandeur and emphasis on law, was also a hotbed of paranoia, ambition, and a terrifying belief in dark magic. Emperors both feared curses and, in their desperation for power, sometimes wielded them themselves, making magic a silent yet potent player in the ruthless game of Roman politics. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest political worry tonight is simply who wins the next election. You've delved into the shadowy world where Roman emperors both feared and dabbled in dark magic, a testament to their pervasive paranoia. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we'll explore another powerful source of imperial anxiety, the terrifying interpretation of omens, portents, and unusual natural phenomena as signs of divine wrath or explicit curses, striking fear into the hearts of even the most powerful rulers. Imagine standing on a bustling Roman street when suddenly the sky darkens unnaturally, or a flock of birds flies in a strange, chaotic pattern to a modern mind. These might be meteorological events or natural animal behavior. But to a Roman, especially one observing these phenomena in the context of political instability or an emperor's controversial reign, they could be chilling messages from the gods, warnings of impending doom, or confirmation that a curse was indeed taking hold. One common historical truth that fueled this widespread interpretation was the deep integration of divination and augury into Roman state religion. The Romans believed that the gods constantly communicated with humanity through signs omnia. Priests known as augurs would interpret the flight patterns of birds, the behavior of animals, or natural phenomena like lightning strikes, a strange sighting in the forum, a lion escaping the circus, or a comet appearing in the sky could all be interpreted as prodigia, prodigies, extraordinary signs of divine displeasure, often seen as a precursor to disaster or a sign that an emperor had lost divine favor. Perhaps even due to a curse. You can almost feel the collective gasp of the crowd as an unusual celestial event unfolds. A fascinating and often unnerving detail is the specific and highly symbolic interpretations attached to various omens. A bolt of lightning striking a particular building might signify divine anger at a specific policy or individual. The birth of a deformed animal might be a dire warning for the future of the empire. The sudden death of sacred chickens might indicate that the gods were refusing to grant their blessing for a military campaign, suggesting a potential curse on the expedition. These weren't vague interpretations, they were often highly detailed and context-specific. Feeding directly into the fears and anxieties of the imperial court, historians still debate the extent to which emperors and their advisors genuinely believed in these omens, versus using them as political tools to influence public opinion or justify certain actions. However, the consistent recording of these events in historical texts suggests they were taken very seriously at the time. Here's a Roman omen joke for you. Why did the Roman soothsayer get fired? Because he kept predicting bad hair days. The emperor, as the chief priest Pontifex Maximus, held a crucial role in maintaining Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, if ill omens appeared. It was often seen as a direct reflection on the emperor's piety or ability to maintain divine favor. This placed immense pressure on the ruler. A series of bad omens could be terrifyingly interpreted as confirmation that a curse, perhaps laid by a disgruntled rival or a disgruntled god, was indeed taking effect, eroding the emperor's divine mandate and potentially leading to his downfall. Consider the psychological toll this constant vigilance would take. An emperor, already under immense pressure from political enemies and military campaigns, would also have to contend with every strange bird flight or sudden storm. Every unexplained event became a potential sign of doom, feeding paranoia and anxiety within the palace walls. The air around the emperor was thick not just with incense, but with unspoken fears of divine retribution or targeted magical attacks. Furthermore, the interpretation of omens could be manipulated for political purposes. An emperor's enemies might spread rumors of ill omens, or even stage prodigies to undermine his authority and suggest he was cursed by the gods. Conversely, a clever emperor could interpret a seemingly negative omen in a positive light, or emphasize auspicious signs to bolster public confidence and solidify his rule. This shows how the belief in omens became a battlefield for political propaganda. You might hear whispers in the street about a raven landing on the emperor's statue, and those whispers could quickly turn into a narrative of impending disaster, one particularly chilling and less commonly known. Aspect was the fear of portenta monstrous births or abnormal natural phenomena as signs of grave curses. The birth of a two-headed calf, or a river running red with blood perhaps due to algae bloom, would not be seen as natural occurrences, but as direct, terrifying warnings from the gods, indicating a profound imbalance or curse upon the land and its ruler. These events often led to extensive purification rituals and sacrifices to appease the offended deities. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, dreamless quiet, remember that for the Roman emperors. The world itself seemed to whisper warnings. Every strange event, every celestial phenomenon, every unusual animal behavior could be interpreted as a divine omen, or the chilling manifestation of a curse. This constant fear of cosmic judgment added a terrifying dimension to their already precarious reigns. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest worry tonight is just a weird dream. Not a sign from the heavens. You've explored how even natural phenomena could strike terror into the hearts of Roman emperors. Seen as omens or curses, now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we descend into the dark, blood-soaked arena of imperial politics. We're about to witness how political assassinations and ruthless power struggles were frequently attributed to, or even deliberately masked by, the ominous shadow of curses. Imagine the cutthroat world of the Roman Empire, where the path to power was often paved with betrayal and bloodshed. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying regularity, and their sudden demise often left a vacuum of power, fueled by suspicion and the desperate need for explanation. In this climate, a curse wasn't just a magical belief. It became a convenient narrative, a potent weapon, and a chilling alibi. One common historical truth that illustrates this perfectly is the sheer frequency of imperial assassinations out of Rome's long line of emperors. A significant number met violent ends, often at the hands of their own Praetorian guards, disgruntled senators, or ambitious family members. When an emperor suddenly died, especially if he was unpopular or seen as a tyrant, the immediate suspicion of foul play was almost inevitable. Attributing the death to a curse could serve multiple purposes. It provided a supernatural explanation that appeased the public, diverted suspicion from the actual conspirators, or even retrospectively justified the assassination as divine retribution. You can almost hear the whispers in the streets. The gods were clearly displeased. It must have been a curse that took him. A fascinating and deeply cynical detail is how the attribution of a curse could be a form of imperial propaganda or character assassination. Even after an emperor's death, if a new emperor wanted to solidify his rule and discredit his predecessor, he might encourage rumors that the previous ruler was cursed, or had brought divine disfavor upon himself through impiety or tyranny. This would legitimize the new regime, portraying it as a divinely sanctioned cleansing. Imagine a new emperor pointing to a sudden plague or military defeat, subtly implying that the previous, now dead, ruler was cursed and had brought this misfortune upon Rome. Historians still debate the precise line between genuine belief in curses and their deliberate manipulation for political ends. It's likely a complex interplay, where genuine superstition was skillfully exploited for political gain by those in power. Here's a Roman political joke for you. Why did the Roman senator get a bad reputation? Because he was always stabbing people in the back, and sometimes the front. The concept of a curse also provided a convenient psychological out for conspirators. If an assassination was planned, and then the emperor conveniently fell ill or suffered a minor accident, it could be seen as a sign that the gods themselves were on the side of the plotters, or that a pre-existing curse was already at work. This divine justification might embolden reluctant participants or assuage their guilt. The supernatural became a silent accomplice, easing the moral burden of murder. Consider the atmosphere of intense paranoia within the imperial court. Emperors, knowing their precarious position, would often fear not just visible enemies, but invisible ones. Any strange object found in their chambers, any odd inscription, or any unusual illness among their household could trigger fears of a targeted magical attack. This heightened state of anxiety made them even more susceptible to believing in curses, seeing them as a very real threat to their fragile grip on power. the emperor might trust no one. But how do you distrust a whisper carried on the wind? A whisper of doom? Furthermore, the use of real or fabricated curse tablets against emperors or their families was an extreme form of dissent or political warfare, while highly risky to produce. A genuine defixio discovered by the authorities, even if not directly causing harm, would lead to witch hunts and purges, creating an atmosphere of terror and suspicion that could destabilize the imperial court. The very fear of a curse, whether real or imagined, was a powerful weapon in itself, one particularly chilling and less commonly known. Aspect relates to the damnatio memoriae, or damnation of memory, while not a curse in the magical sense. This official decree to erase an emperor from history after his death by defacing statues. Erasing names from inscriptions was a form of political curse, aiming to deny him an afterlife and any lasting legacy. Sometimes, the damnatio memoriae would be accompanied by rumors that the emperor had brought a genuine curse upon himself, further cementing his utter condemnation in both earthly and divine realms. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, silent quiet, remember that for Roman emperors, curses were far more than just superstitions. They were potent political tools, used to explain away assassinations, to legitimize new rulers, and to sow fear among rivals. The line between natural death, political murder, and magical malevolence was terrifyingly blurred, making the imperial court a place where unseen forces were always suspected of playing a hand in the brutal game of power. And as you finally drift into your own safe modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest political worry tonight is simply a noisy neighbor, not a clandestine magical assault. You've delved into the dark interplay of Roman imperial politics and the manipulation of curses, where ambition and superstition walked hand in hand. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we'll explore another powerful dimension of these hidden threats, how rumors of curses were weaponized, shaping public opinion and serving as potent propaganda against disliked emperors. Imagine the vast, diverse populace of the Roman Empire, from the bustling streets of Rome itself to the distant provinces. While they might not have direct access to the emperor's private chambers, they were keenly aware of imperial successes and failures, and often, their daily lives were directly impacted by the whims of the ruler. In this environment, where information spread through whispers and gossip as much as official decrees, the idea of an emperor being cursed could ignite widespread discontent and even rebellion. One common historical truth that made this form of propaganda so effective was the deep-seated Roman belief in divine favor, and the concept of felicitous good fortune being tied to the emperor. A successful emperor was seen as having the god's blessing, bringing prosperity and stability to the empire. Conversely, an emperor who experienced military defeats, natural disasters like famines or plagues, or personal misfortunes could easily be painted as having lost divine favor. Or worse, as being actively cursed. This made him vulnerable to public distrust and provided a convenient narrative for those seeking his downfall. You can almost hear the common folk grumbling in the taverns. The gods are clearly angry with Emperor X. He must be cursed. Must be a fascinating and politically astute. Detail is how opponents of an emperor, whether senators, rival claimants, or even disaffected generals, would subtly or overtly encourage these rumors of curses. They wouldn't necessarily cast a defixio themselves too risky, but they would exploit existing superstitions. If a drought occurred, they might suggest it was due to the emperor's impiety or a hidden curse upon his family. If the gladiatorial games went poorly, it could be spun as a sign of divine displeasure with the emperor himself. This was a form of psychological warfare, chipping away at the emperor's legitimacy in the eyes of the populace. Historians still debate the specific instances where rumors of curses were deliberately fabricated versus growing organically from existing anxieties. However, The political elite certainly understood and exploited the power of public opinion, shaped by such fears. Here's a Roman propaganda joke for you. Why did the unpopular emperor try to hire a good public speaker? Because his approval ratings were cursed. The speed at which these rumors could spread was remarkable, even without modern media. Through taverns, bathhouses, public gatherings, and even military camps. Whispers of an emperor being cursed would travel, eroding trust and fostering dissent. These rumors could easily turn everyday misfortunes into proof of divine condemnation, further destabilizing an already precarious reign. The public, often grappling with their own hardships, would readily embrace explanations that provided a supernatural reason for their suffering, especially if it implicated the distant, often oppressive, imperial power. Consider the atmosphere during a time of crisis. If Rome faced a barbarian invasion, a major fire, or a widespread illness, and the emperor was unpopular, the idea of him being cursed would gain immense traction. The crisis would be seen as a direct consequence of his spiritual failings. Rather than a military or administrative problem, this allowed political factions to rally support for his removal, not by outright rebellion, but by appealing to a deeper, more primal fear within the populace. Furthermore, the historical record itself sometimes reflects this propaganda. Ancient historians, writing after the fact, might incorporate rumors of curses or divine disfavor into their accounts of unpopular emperors, reinforcing the narrative that these rulers were justly brought low. Tacitus, Suetonius, and Dio Cassius, while often critical, would sometimes relay these popular beliefs, even if they didn't explicitly endorse them as facts. This shows how ingrained the idea of a cursed emperor became in the historical memory. You're reading history that might itself be a reflection of ancient propaganda, one particularly chilling, and less commonly known. Aspect of this weaponization was the deliberate use of negative omens or false prodigies by political rivals, while genuine omens were interpreted by augurs. A cunning opponent might arrange for a seemingly ominous event to occur, a stray bird of ill omen released near the imperial palace, or a staged unlucky accident to fuel the existing rumors of a curse. This created a self-reinforcing cycle of fear and distrust, making the emperor's position increasingly untenable without a single sword being drawn. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, silent quiet, remember that for Roman emperors, public opinion was as crucial as military might, and the rumor of a curse, amplified by political rivals and fueled by popular superstition, was a terrifyingly effective weapon in the constant battle for control. It highlights how even the most powerful rulers were vulnerable to the unseen forces of collective belief and insidious propaganda. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest worry tonight is just a bad review, not a cosmic condemnation. You've witnessed how the whispers of a curse could become a potent political weapon, shaping public opinion against even the most powerful Roman emperors. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we turn our attention to a deeper, more profound fear that haunted the imperial palace, the belief that a curse could be divine punishment for an emperor's arrogance or impiety, a cosmic retribution for overstepping mortal bounds. Imagine an emperor, resplendent in his imperial purple, basking in the adoration of the crowds, perhaps even claiming divine status himself. Yet, in the Roman worldview, such hubris or superbia was a dangerous game. The gods, though powerful, were also capricious and fiercely protective of their own prerogatives. To challenge them, to act with excessive pride or disregard for religious custom, was to invite disaster, a form of divine curse far more terrifying than any human-made defixio. One common historical truth that underpins this fear is the Roman emphasis on pietas, piety, and religio, proper religious observance. A good Roman, and especially a good Roman emperor, was expected to show proper respect and devotion to the gods, maintaining the pax deorum peace of the gods through correct rituals and sacrifices. To neglect these duties, to claim too much for oneself, or to commit blasphemy, was seen as directly provoking the divine, opening oneself and indeed the entire empire to their wrath. Any misfortune that followed could then be easily interpreted as a direct consequence, a divine curse. You can almost feel the weight of expectation on an emperor, tasked with keeping the gods happy. A fascinating and often tragic detail is how historical accounts often link the downfall of emperors to perceived acts of superbia or impiety. Emperors like Caligula, known for his excesses and claims of divinity, was said to have suffered various misfortunes and eventually assassination, which many Romans might have attributed to divine retribution for his arrogance, even if the immediate cause was political conspiracy. The popular narrative would often frame it as a divinely sanctioned punishment. Historians still debate the extent to which these historical narratives reflect genuine Roman belief versus being literary tropes used to moralize about the dangers of tyranny. However, the consistent appearance of this theme suggests it resonated deeply with Roman audiences. Here's a Roman divine joke for you. Why did Jupiter get angry with the emperor who built too many statues of himself? Because he thought the emperor was being a little too god-complexed. The concept of divine punishment manifested in various ways. It wasn't just a sudden, dramatic death. A curse from the gods could bring about a series of misfortunes, military defeats, famine, plague, natural disasters, or even personal afflictions like chronic illness or madness. These widespread calamities would be interpreted as signs that the gods were displeased with the emperor, directly linking his personal impiety to the suffering of the entire populace. The emperor, supposedly Rome's protector, would instead be seen as its curse. Consider the atmosphere within the imperial court when a string of misfortunes befell the empire. Every setback would be scrutinized, every illness debated, every natural disaster seen as a potential sign of divine wrath. Advisors, eager to curry favor or shift blame, might subtly suggest that the emperor's recent actions or words had offended the gods. Feeding into his own anxieties and paranoia, the weight of divine expectation was heavier than any physical crown. Furthermore, the imperial cult, while designed to elevate the emperor, also created a dangerous tightrope walk. To be worshipped as a god after death was acceptable, but to demand divine honors while alive was often seen as presumptuous and could provoke the jealousy of the established gods. Emperors who pushed this boundary, like Caligula or Domitian, were often met with resistance and, ultimately, violent ends, which were then easily interpreted as divine curses for their superbia, one particularly chilling and less commonly known aspect of this belief was the fear of a generational curse from divine displeasure if an emperor was particularly impious. It was believed that his transgression could bring misfortune not just upon himself, but upon his family, his successors, or even his entire dynasty. This added another layer of terror, as an emperor's actions could have far-reaching and devastating consequences, a curse echoing through time. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, silent quiet, remember that for Roman emperors. The threat of a curse extended beyond human enemies and magical tablets. It came from the very heavens, a potential divine retribution for arrogance or impiety. The weight of keeping the gods appeased was a constant burden, and any misfortune could be seen as proof that the emperor had overstepped his bounds, inviting a cosmic curse upon himself and his empire. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest worry tonight is just a bad dream. Not the wrath of Olympus. You've witnessed the terrifying potential for divine wrath to manifest as a curse upon arrogant Roman emperors, revealing a vulnerability even at the apex of power. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we shift from the offensive to the defensive, We're about to examine the various magical and religious methods Romans employed to ward off evil spells and protect themselves. A testament to their pervasive belief in the unseen forces that could influence their lives? Imagine a Roman citizen, from a bustling city merchant to a humble farmer, going about their daily life. Despite their reliance on law and order, a deep-seated apprehension about malevolent magic lingered. They understood that just as curses could be cast, so too could they be countered, deflected, or negated. This led to a rich tapestry of protective practices, woven into the fabric of their daily existence. One common historical truth that is widely evidenced is the widespread use of amulets and talismans for personal protection. These small objects, often worn around the neck, wrist, or carried in a pouch, were believed to possess magical properties to ward off evil, deflect curses, or bring good fortune. Common forms included the bulla, a locket worn by freeborn boys to protect them from evil until they came of age, or various phallic symbols like the fascinus worn or displayed to avert the evil eye invidia. You can almost see a Roman senator, beneath his dignified toga, wearing a small protective charm, just in case. A fascinating and often overlooked detail is the specific apotropaic evil-averting rituals performed in homes and public spaces. It wasn't just about wearing charms. Romans would use specific plants like rue or garlic, symbols like the gorgonian, a depiction of Medusa's head, or even certain types of knots or words to physically or symbolically bind evil or deflect malevolent energies. Imagine a Roman homeowner sprinkling protective herbs at their doorway, or inscribing a warding phrase over their lintel, a daily ritual to keep unseen threats at bay. Historians still debate the precise origins and regional variations of these protective rituals. While some were rooted in ancient Italic traditions, others showed influence from Greek, Etruscan, and even Eastern magical practices. Here's a Roman protection joke for you. Why did the Roman always bring a ladder to a cursed house? Because he heard the evil spirits like to climb walls, and he wanted to keep them from getting over it. The Roman state religion, while primarily focused on public cults and the Pax Deorum, also incorporated protective elements. Priests would perform purification rituals lustratio for cities, armies, or fields, designed to cleanse them of any malevolent influences or divine displeasure. These were large-scale counter-curses, aimed at ensuring the well-being of the entire community. The very act of performing these rituals instilled a sense of security and divine protection against unseen threats. Consider the role of prayers and invocations to specific deities for protection. Romans would appeal to gods like Mercury for protection on journeys, Minerva for wisdom and protection in crafts, or even specific protective spirits, Lares and Penates of the household. These prayers weren't just requests for good fortune. They were often explicit appeals for defense against dark magic or malevolent forces. Directly asking the gods to intervene and shield them from harm? You might hear a Roman quietly murmuring a protective prayer as they passed a suspicious individual. Furthermore, the use of good luck charms and symbols, while seemingly innocuous, also served an apotropaic function. Things like lucky coins, depictions of Fortuna, goddess of luck, or images of a benevolent genius, a guardian spirit, were meant to attract positive energy and thus repel negative influences, including curses. It was a proactive approach to maintain a favorable cosmic balance around oneself, one particularly grim and less commonly known. Aspect of countermagic involved retaliatory curses against those believed to have cast a curse. If a Roman suspected they were a victim of a defixio, they might commission their own curse tablet, not to harm a rival in a mundane way, but specifically to revert the malevolent magic back onto the original caster, or to bind their power. This was a direct magical counterattack, a spiritual tit-for-tat, designed to turn the tables on the aggressor. You might find a defixio wishing harm on whoever cursed me, a desperate plea for justice through supernatural means. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, silent quiet. Remember that for the Romans, living in a world brimming with unseen forces and potential curses. Self-protection was paramount, from personal amulets to public rituals and even retaliatory magic. They employed a vast array of methods to ward off evil and ensure their well-being. And as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber, perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest worry tonight is just a bad dream, not a nefarious spell cast by a disgruntled rival. You've explored the intricate defensive measures Romans employed to ward off curses, a testament to their constant vigilance against unseen malevolence. Now, as the soft, steady hum of your fan continues to soothe you, we move into a period of profound transformation. A seismic shift in the spiritual landscape of the Roman world, the rise of Christianity and the subsequent gradual decline in the explicit practice and understanding of traditional Roman magic and curses. Imagine the Roman Empire, a vast polytheistic tapestry where gods and spirits, omens and curses were deeply woven into daily life. Then, a new religion emerges from the East, gaining traction first among the marginalized, then spreading through all strata of society, bringing with it a radically different worldview, one that challenged the very foundations of Roman magical beliefs. One common historical truth that marked this shift was Christianity's unequivocal condemnation of magic and pagan rituals, including curses. For Christians, there was only one true God, and any attempt to manipulate the supernatural through pagan gods or magical practices was seen as idolatry, heresy, and ultimately, an act of evil, often attributed to demonic forces. This stark theological opposition directly challenged the legitimacy and efficacy of traditional Roman curses. You can almost hear the fervent sermons condemning the very practices we've discussed tonight. A fascinating and somewhat ironic detail is that while official Christian doctrine condemned magic, the belief in supernatural evil and malevolent forces did not disappear, it merely transmuted. Instead of pagan deities or neutral magical forces inflicting curses, Christians attributed misfortune and ill will to the devil and his demons. So, while the source of the curse changed from a defixio invoking Mercury to a demonic affliction, the concept of malevolent supernatural influence persisted. Imagine a Roman, newly converted to Christianity, still fearing misfortune, but now attributing it to Satan rather than a vengeful goddess. Historians still debate the extent to which early Christians distinguished between good divine and bad demonic miracles, and how much pagan magical concepts simply re-emerged within a Christian framework. Here's a Roman religious shift joke for you. Why did the Roman god give up his job? Because he said the new management was just heavenly. The legal landscape also began to shift. As Christianity gained imperial favor and eventually became the state religion, particularly after Emperor Theodosius the First in the late 4th century, laws against traditional magic became even stricter, often conflating it with treason and heresy. What was once viewed with suspicion was now actively persecuted. Magicians, astrologers, and practitioners of curse magic faced increasingly severe penalties, driving their practices further underground or forcing them to adopt a Christian veneer. This state-sanctioned suppression actively contributed to the decline of overt magical practices. Consider the psychological impact on the Roman populace. For centuries, they had turned to various magical means for protection, revenge, or influence. Now, they were told that these practices were not only ineffective, but also spiritually dangerous. This would have created a dilemma for many, forcing them to abandon deeply ingrained beliefs and rely solely on prayer, divine intervention, and the saints for protection against misfortune. The reassurance once found in an amulet now had to be found in faith. Furthermore, the rise of Christian saints and martyrs introduced new forms of blessing and counter magic. Instead of pagan gods, people would appeal to saints for intercession against illness, misfortune, or even demonic possession. Relics of saints were believed to offer powerful protection. So, while the pagan curse declined, a new Christian form of supernatural protection emerged, fulfilling a similar human need for divine intervention in their lives. You might swap your fastness amulet for a small cross, one particularly poignant and less commonly known. Aspect of this transition was the Christianization of some older magical practices, rather than disappearing entirely. Some traditional charms or rituals were reinterpreted with Christian prayers or symbols. For example, an incantation to ward off fever might once have invoked a pagan deity, but now it would be adapted to invoke Christ or a specific saint. This blending shows the slow, complex process of cultural adaptation rather than an abrupt, total abandonment of all magical thinking. So, as you slowly succumb to the deep, silent quiet, remember that the Roman world witnessed a profound spiritual revolution that fundamentally altered the understanding and use of curses. The rise of Christianity, with its condemnation of pagan magic, pushed traditional curses into the shadows, transforming them into notions of demonic influence. It highlights how deeply intertwined religious belief and magical practice were, and how a shift in one could irrevocably change the other, and as you finally drift into your own safe, modern slumber. Perhaps you'll appreciate the comforting thought that your biggest spiritual worry tonight is simply whether you'll remember to turn off the light. You've traversed the complex spiritual landscape of the Roman Empire, witnessing the rise and fall of various magical beliefs, and how the advent of Christianity fundamentally reshaped the understanding of curses. Now, as the soft, rhythmic hum of your fan gently whispers you closer to true slumber, we arrive at our final destination, reflecting on the paranoia of ancient power as you drift into a profoundly calm, utterly undisturbed sleep. Imagine the immense weight of being a Roman emperor, a figure of unimaginable power, yet perpetually vulnerable. Their lives were a constant tightrope walk between divine favor and human ambition, military might and insidious whispers, the fear of a curse, whether from a vengeful god, a jealous rival, or a malevolent spell, was not a distant abstraction but a very real, very personal threat that permeated their magnificent palaces and shadowed their every decision. One common historical truth that sums up the imperial experience is the inherent insecurity of supreme power in a ruthless political system. Roman emperors often ascended to their position through violence, and they knew their rule could end the same way. This constant existential threat from assassination, rebellion, or even sudden illness created an environment ripe for paranoia. A curse, whether genuine or imagined, provided a convenient explanation for misfortune and a psychological scapegoat for the emperor's anxieties. You can almost feel the tremor in their hands as they held the reins of an empire. Knowing how many wished them ill, a fascinating and deeply human detail is how the very act of wielding immense power seemed to foster a unique brand of isolation and suspicion. Emperors, surrounded by sycophants and potential betrayers, often found themselves utterly alone. This isolation could amplify fears of unseen enemies and malevolent magic, turning every strange occurrence into a potential sign of a curse. The more powerful they became, the more vulnerable they felt to forces beyond their control. Imagine having everything, yet trusting no one, and fearing the invisible most of all. Historians still debate the extent to which individual emperors' psychological states were genuinely affected by these fears versus the political realities they faced. However, the prevalence of these anxieties in historical accounts suggests a deep-seated vulnerability. Here's one last soothing thought to ease you into sleep. What did the Roman emperor say before he went to bed? Et tu, brute, no, just the cat trying to get into the bed. The journey we've taken tonight, through the tiny, malevolent deficciones, the emperor's secret dabbling in magic, the chilling interpretation of omens, and the weaponization of curses for political gain paints a vivid picture of a world where the supernatural was inextricably linked to the exercise of power. It reminds us that even the most formidable empires and their rulers were profoundly shaped by their beliefs, fears, and the ever-present shadow of the unseen. Consider the stark contrast between their world and yours. The Roman emperor's slumber was often restless, haunted by whispers of doom, the fear of poison, or the anxiety of a divine curse. Your slumber tonight is profound and unburdened. You face no senatorial conspiracies, no Praetorian Guard betrayals, and certainly no ancient lead tablets buried with malevolent intent. The narratives of paranoia, the desperate attempts at protection, the shifting religious landscapes, they all belong to a past where the stakes were astronomically high, and the lines between fate, magic, and human action were terrifyingly blurred. Today, that clarity allows us to rest with a sense of security and peace that was largely unknown to the rulers of ancient Rome. And so, as the final thoughts gently dissipate into the quiet expanse of your mind, allow yourself to fully embrace this profound sense of peace. The terrifying anxieties of ancient power have been explored, understood, and safely confined to the history books. There are no magical assaults to fear, no omens to interpret, and no desperate pleas to the gods. Just the comforting stillness of your room, the steady rhythm of your own breath, and the deep, undisturbed, truly peaceful sleep that now awaits you. You are safe. You are warm. You are at peace.